Hello, WiCCD members. My name is Shukairy, and I am WiCCD's Education Committee Director. I'm happy to introduce our series, Finding Your Niche. In this series, we will interview female criminal defense lawyers who practice in a specific area within criminal law. The goal of our series is to highlight the work and accomplishments of female criminal defense lawyers, but it is also a way for us to introduce you to specialty areas within criminal law. We hope we can help you find your niche. Enjoy the series.
Hello, Leora. How are you?
I am wonderful. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. And I'm very happy to meet you. I've been wanting to meet you for a long, long time. I've heard so much about you. You're pretty well known in Ontario as one of the go-to drug and guns lawyer. And I'm actually very excited to hear more about your practice from you. So if you can start, Leora, by telling us more about your practice, what you do, where's your practice based, and what kind of files or cases do you focus on?
All right. Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to meet you as well. I am based in Toronto, in downtown Toronto, just a couple of blocks away from 361 University and the new courthouse. I was called in 2000, so I've been at this for some time, really focusing on search and seizure, charter applications, and charter challenges, whether it be drugs or guns. And many of my cases seem to sort of involve challenging some type of search warrant and/or a search and seizure of some kind. Lately, I've been doing a lot of homicide work. That was not my go-to for many, many years, but it has sort of evolved into that. So sprinkled into my heavy search warrant based search and seizure workload has now become sort of sprinkled with homicide cases. So I do a lot of those as well. But most of my cases tend to be long in nature. They're not 1 or 2 days anymore. They tend to span a little bit longer and require more pretrial motions and motions generally. So that's sort of where I'm at. My space, I have a space in downtown Toronto that kind of overlooks the city. And I have other criminal lawyers that are in my space. So not only just my staff, two associates, a law clerk, and a student, but I also have my cousin who is on the other end of the office, Jordana Goldlist, who has been with me for many years. So we have different practices, but we share a space and have the ability to walk into each other's offices and vent when we need to and ask questions and bounce off ideas, which I think is really necessary for all lawyers, whether you're, a junior lawyer or a senior lawyer. It's really, really amazing to have someone to bounce off ideas with that's actually physically in your space. Things that happened right after court or before court or even during, it's important to be able to rely on someone just as a sounding board, if anything. So
And
that's where I'm at.
thank you. And Jordana shares office space with you, but you're operating as a sole practitioner, or
I
is
am.
it as a corporate? Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm a sole practitioner, and she too is a sole practitioner. But we share the actual office space. So we've been together a while now. I wasn't always on university. I was at college first, and I've sort of evolved from the one little office that I had after leaving. I was initially at Newburger Rose, and I was there for about 7 years as a partner. And then after my second child, I decided to go out on my own. I wanted to be my own boss and decide when to come to work and when to take vacation and when to spend more time with my children. So I decided to go out on my own, and I was fortunate along the way to meet wonderful people that took me into their chambers. A number of boys, I call them boys, but a number of men took me into their chambers on College Street, well-known lawyers that we all know, Gary Grill and James Silver and Stephen Bernstein, who's now a judge, and Adam Newman. And there was a whole bunch of guys who agreed to take me into this little interior office space. And I remember setting up my office and being so proud to be there. It had no windows, but I was just so happy to be around colleagues who made the transition from being an employee to being my own boss very, very easy. It was smooth and it was easy, and it was just it was a delight to be there. And then slowly but surely, I moved from that one small interior office space to my own space in the same building, and I was across the hall from them on College Street and remained there for many years. Jordana joined me eventually when she left Ted Royal's office, also as an employee, to open up her own office. And we grew, and then moved to university. So it's been a slow progression. It's felt a lot quicker than it has been. Time goes by very, very quickly, as you know, but it has been a progression, and the growth in criminal law is astronomical in my opinion. You're always learning and you're always growing, because if you're not, then you're not doing something right. But you are always growing and always learning. And so I've been blessed along the way to have met so many wonderful people that I think really have shaped who I am and the type of practice that I have.
And you have windows now in your office.
I have beautiful windows.
Okay.
Yes, although I will say I got this office space on the 19th floor because it was the only little piece of Toronto where you could still see the water and you could see the island from University Street. And then during COVID, they stuck up this monstrosity of a building that's windowed everywhere, Cadillac Fairview, and they have literally stunted any
Ruined your
view that I
view.
have of the water. Yeah, but I am on the 19th floor and I do get to look out at the city, and I'm windowed on both sides. So yes, that's why I say there's been progression from
Yeah.
my small interior office that I paid really nothing for to a much more expensive place that I really love and have now called home. So yeah, the boys are just down the street at 55 University. I'm at 155 University, and we still see each other all the time and still talk all the time. So it's important to make connections and network with people as a criminal lawyer. I think it can be very isolating some days, and you feel quite
Especially
alone.
as a sole practitioner.
Totally. And so I think having people there that you know you can count on and rely upon is so helpful in this business, particularly this field. So I still rely on them and still call them all the time.
Well, that's very nice, and it's also very important always to remind, especially new lawyers, that you have to always be in contact with colleagues who are maybe at the same year of call, but also older or younger. You always learn from
Oh, absolutely.
from
Absolutely.
different lawyers. But Leora, so one of the things that many new lawyers may be thinking about is if they look up to you and they see that you now are at a stage in your career where you're doing all these important and complex cases. So every criminal lawyer aspires to one day have a practice where they're doing these complex search and seizure cases, homicide cases. So maybe if you can tell us more about how that was built. And first of all, was it intentional? Was it your intention to get to that point, or did it just happen by luck? And what do you think people should do if they want to build a similar career?
Yeah, I think maybe it was a little bit intentional. I think when I started as a young lawyer at Newberger Rose, Joe Newberger is an expert when it comes to cross-examining sort of civilian witnesses. So I call them unseasoned witnesses, the run-of-the-mill people who get into fights or sex assaults or domestics, just run-of-the-mill people. And I tended to focus more on the police witnesses, the more seasoned witnesses, the more trained witnesses. I felt it was more of a challenge because they were trained and because they were used to testifying all the time and could rely on notes and so on and so forth. It was more technical, I found. So I found at his office, I was really given the task of dealing with all the search warrants and the drug cases, and I became his go-to drug lawyer. And I liked it. I found it exciting. Every warrant was a little bit different, but the law was certainly the same. But the officers and cross-examining the officers was the challenging aspect that I really liked. And it grew from there. When I left his office, I think I took that drug portfolio with me. And I made a lot of contacts when I was in that office with the legalization of marijuana. So I was one of the lawyers on the legalization of marijuana in Regina versus Hitzik at the Court of Appeal. And I made a lot of friends that tended to get into trouble from growing marijuana. That was still obviously on the books back then, and so a lot of my cases were about grow operations. And I took it personally. A lot of these clients were sick. A lot of them were growing for their own individual purposes, trying to maintain their own supply. Didn't feel comfortable, getting a government supply, and I took it personally, and I took on those challenges, I think, pretty vehemently. And then from there, it just grew into other drugs. So I really began specializing in drug trafficking, drug importation, grow operations, and slowly but surely it evolved. And I did that for, I would say, a large portion of my career has been being a quote unquote drug lawyer. And there's a few of us in the city, and I think we all have our own, different abilities and strengths. And I began to focus my practice that way. I don't necessarily think at that point I wanted to only be doing that work, but it sort of became that way. And then I think I had done one or two homicides, and it just grew from there. And I've been doing quite a bit of them every year now. So it's a little bit of both. It's become almost shared, where it's not just a drug practice. There's guns obviously that go hand in hand more often than not with the drug practice, but it's also become quite the homicide type practice. I rarely, if ever, do domestics anymore, and maybe sprinkled here and there some sex assaults. So, yeah, I want to say I think it was intentional in the beginning, but I don't think ever when you're in it you think, oh, I'm only going to be doing this type of work. And quite frankly, year after year, it did get a little monotonous that I was looking
Yeah.
at warrants. But I will say, other lawyers, which I was so happy to receive these calls, but I would get other lawyers calling me up and saying, hey, can you take a look at this search warrant? Tell me what you think. And I was all too happy to do that. So they are technical defenses, kind of like the lawyers who do the drinking and driving
Impaired
cases.
driving. Yeah.
Yeah, who I get them and I don't even know where to
Yeah.
begin. I'll be the first to admit it, that is not my forte. It does not excite me. I'll do them, but it does not make me happy doing them. So I think other lawyers have their niche, and this has become my niche, and I'm happy where I am right now, doing a little bit of both the homicides and the drug practice. I'm happy that it's a little bit more balanced.
Okay, so balance in the sense that you're adding more variety. It's not just the drugs and the warrants, it's also
Yeah, and I think
homicides
and
as
I
well.
think it helps too. Like when you're doing a homicide case, there's pre-trial motions traditionally that encompass, search warrant challenges, whether it's DNA or whether or not it's video surveillance or challenging a search warrant. So fortunately for me, my background in challenging warrants year after year, month after month, has certainly assisted me in formulating arguments when I'm arguing, sort of more serious homicide cases where pretrial motions are brought and often rely upon challenging search warrants. So it has helped.
But Leora, so whether it's the drug cases or the homicide cases, these are very complex cases, and as you mentioned, uh, they're lengthy cases. Like it's not something that you're going to be doing for a, a day or two. Trials tend to be super long.
Yes.
Um, And so that's very demanding. Like, I mean, the longer the trial, the more prep you have to put into it. So the
Yes.
question here is, especially for a female lawyer, and especially if you're a mom and you have children, how do you balance that? And you're a sole practitioner. I mean, like that. I know you mentioned you have associates, but at the end of the day, you are the lawyer that the clients want you to represent them at the trial.
Hmm.
So it's a lot of work. It's
It is.
extremely challenging work. And I think you also have two daughters that you're
I
raising at the
do.
same time, and you're
Yes.
running your practice. You're the boss.
Yes. Yeah, I
So
always
tell
say
us.
much easier to do a murder trial than take care of a 17-year-old and a
Okay.
15-year-old. I can tell you that right now. Much easier to close the door Monday morning in my car and have my coffee in hand and talk about my murder case than take care of my 17-year-old and my 15-year-old.
And
It's
tell
hard. I
us,
mean, listen,
yeah, tell us more
it's
about
hard.
that.
I'm spoiled. I think that I'm spoiled. I have two wonderful parents who are probably my biggest fan base and cheerleaders. So they do a lot of driving around and picking up and dropping off, and that motto of "it takes a village" does really apply to me. And I'm
Mhm.
really spoiled and grateful to all the people that do help out. I have a husband who's self-employed that allows me to be me and gives me my platform and cheers me on all the time, but knows that he has to pick up the slack. So if I'm stuck in court, he has to, pick them up or drop them off, and he's all too happy to do so. I've called on brothers, I have help in the house. Like I do have a wonderful support system that not everybody else gets to have, and I'm grateful for it. So I don't ever anyone ever to think that I'm doing this all on my own. I'm certainly not. There is a team of people who really do make this that much easier for me, and not just easier in getting to places, but easier in allowing me to be able to focus at work. I will say, I don't think you can be great at both. I know people say that's not true, but I'm going to tell you that I don't think I'm great at both. Could I be a better mom, more attentive mom, not miss certain things at school? Yeah, I guess I could have, but I would have to give up obviously being there for somebody else's child. So there's a balance that often gets struck. And I felt in the early days of their life, I was struck by enormous guilt more often than not. And my
Mom
husband would,
guilt. Yeah.
yeah, mom guilt. And my husband would always remind me that, they won't remember. And I guess if you ask them now, truthfully, if they remember if mom came to computer lab, maybe they'll say, who cares? Or I don't remember. But I try to be there now for what I think will be things that they will remember. Important tournaments. I have one who's a really high performance tennis player. I have another one who's a high performance runner, both athletes. So I try to be there for those things, moments that count now, I think, in their lives. Not that the other ones didn't, but maybe these ones they'll remember mom being there. But yeah, I guess I could have been better at balancing things, but I think we all do what we can as best as we can. And I think I've strived to do that every year, reminding myself maybe to take it down a notch. Don't take things too personally. Don't take work home. One day it's okay, the next day not so much. So this
Well,
is a
that's the thing.
yeah, very tough profession. Particularly if you're someone who really feels your cases, and I really feel my cases, and probably to my detriment. There's lots of people who can turn it off, and unfortunately, I'm not that person. I have a very special colleague who's my best friend, Gary Grill, who always tells me, like, you have to turn it off. And I can't. Usually, when I'm in a case, I'm breathing that case, whether it's at home in bed by myself, or when I'm in the car driving to work, or when I'm with my kids, I'm constantly thinking about that case. What's my strategy? How can I box this witness in? What should I ask? How do I fashion this pretrial motion? And so, yeah, should I be more present with my family? Probably. But we do the best that we can. I think all of us do. And I think all of us struggle with finding that happy balance. And it's probably a little bit of a misnomer to say that you have found the great balance, because I don't necessarily think there is one. So I take care of my two kids, my 17-year-old and my 15-year-old, both girls. And I also try to work out for myself. I think as a criminal lawyer, maybe any lawyer. I think it's really important to save time for yourself too. So I'm up really early in the morning, usually working out. And I try to play as much tennis as I possibly can now because that's really what I want to do now
I
all
love that
the
because
time.
I'm the same.
Yeah.
I have my morning time is reserved for working out, and
Yeah.
I just don't know how I would be able to do this job without securing time for that every day in the morning. So it's
Yeah. So I think that's
really
my
important.
thing. Yeah, it's your stress release. I find, I
Yeah.
don't know if you use it the same way, but it's for me just to release some stress where I have an hour and I'm not thinking about a case and I'm not thinking about my kids and worrying about if they're going to be okay and how they're doing in school or their athletics. So yeah, it's an hour just for me, and I think we all have an hour. Hopefully, we all have an hour to ourselves. So those are the balls that I have in the air. Add in a dog for during COVID because I thought that was a great idea. I don't know what I was thinking. But yeah, we all have different balls in the air, and I think it's how you manage them. And I'm very, very fortunate to have lots of people to help. And I know there's lots of women and men out there that don't have the support system that I have. So I'm extremely grateful that I have it.
And you have your cousin as well,
I have
who's
my kids.
around.
Yes.
Um, but okay, so you just explained to us a bit how you balance your work with your personal life. Another aspect that I'm also interested in knowing a bit more about, Leora, it's how do you do these types of cases, because they're very tough, and the clients for the drug cases, the homicide cases, are the more challenging and more difficult clients. So how do you deal with them as a female lawyer? Have you had some difficulty, especially at the beginning? I mean, I think now you're at a point where you are in control and clients know that, but especially when you were starting off with these challenging cases and challenging clients, how was the relationship with them as a female, especially a defense lawyer?
It's funny, I never thought of clients being the difficult ones that I had to break through as a female. My clients have been lovely and wonderful. Majority of them, I mean, we all have our one or two, but the majority of the clients that I have had, I still maintain wonderful friendships with them and relationships. They come by, they drop me a line, they let me know how they're doing. It was really the judges and the crown attorneys that I found I had to sort of earn their respect. I didn't feel the same way with clients. Maybe because I didn't waste too much time thinking about it. I have a task to do, which is to take care of you and ensure that you're not, convicted at the end of the proceeding. But I think I was so focused on ensuring that I was doing everything that I had to get them to the finish line that I didn't really think about whether or not they were being difficult or not, or whether or not I had their respect. More often than not, I felt that I did. It was really the judges that it took a
So,
while.
if
It
you
took a
don't
while.
mind actually explaining more about that, because this is something that a lot of female lawyers are experiencing right now,
Of course.
especially after COVID. It just feels like there is a little bit more toughness from the bench. So maybe if you can elaborate more on that, Leora.
Yeah, I felt like I really had to earn my stripes. I don't know if everyone has that same story, but I remember being a young lawyer sitting in set day court and, why is no one calling my matter? And like, I've been sitting here for 3 hours and just thinking, like, I went to law school, I have my law degree, like, hello, no one's looking over here. And I envied those ones that would like fly in and have their matter called and then fly out with their cape, and I'd still be sitting there. So I remember those days. I remember, feeling young and sort of, I don't want to say disrespected, but disrespected, and not sort of gaining that respect from either the bench or the crown attorneys. And, I think I learned over a short period of time that really, I don't want to say cozying up to people because that's the wrong phraseology, but I think letting people know you're there and
But
letting
how
them
do you do
know who
that?
you are.
But
Yeah.
how?
So, at the beginning of a day or at the break, hi, I'm so and so. Just wanted to introduce myself. really just sort of breaking the ice and making sure they know who you are, being pleasant, being respectful, all of that, obviously. The other thing is it's just time, like I think in anything, you have to sort of earn your way. You don't get to just come out of law school and think that your matter is going to be called first. And you don't get to just sort of sit on the sidelines and wait for someone to call you up. You have to go out and get it. And it took time. It took time with judges. I found I've had lots of incidences with judges who would get, the pronunciation of my last name wrong, and I would hate it, and I would have to correct. But year after year, it got better, and judges would say, "I now know how to say your name."
Good.
Yeah. So I just think those things, not saying my last name right is not because it's a difficult last name. It's because you don't care to say my last
To
name
make the
right.
effort. Yeah.
Yeah. So my view of it is I'm going to put you on notice that I want you to care.
On the
And
record.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's important, Your Honor, that, I help you with the pronunciation of my last name. It's this. I know it could be difficult, but I would appreciate it if you called me by my real last name, which is this. And I think over time, some judges would smile, some judges not so much. But I think over time, you're in court more, you're winning cases, or even if you're not winning cases, you're in the law, you're more immersed in the courtroom.
And
And I
people
think,
see you in action, right? They see
yeah,
what you're doing. They see you know
yeah,
what you're doing.
yeah.
So their perception changes.
Yeah. And then you have, proceedings with Crown attorneys where they enjoyed working with you and they'll speak to other people and slowly but surely you gain the respect of your colleagues and the bench. And I think that's important. Gaining the respect of your own colleagues on the defense side is very, very important, equally on the other side, no matter how bitter you can have exchanges with Crown attorneys. I think it's important to be civil and respectful. Sometimes you can't, but you do the best that you can. And over time, I think it develops. So I remember it being a while before I could say, oh, like they know who I am now. I remember it taking a bit for people to actually know who I was and to be a little bit more respectful with me, whether it be the judges or the crowns. Now I'm old, so now it doesn't matter.
You don't look
now,
old.
now I don't
But
care. But you
well,
care as a young lawyer because
yes.
you want to feel accepted and you want to feel appreciated by the bench and by the crowns. And I remember that feeling like I want people to know that I'm here and that I'm serious and that I'm organized and that I'm ready and I want to be taken seriously. And I remember, that meaning a lot to me when I was a younger lawyer. And maybe the trick, now that I've been through it, is to say
Mhm.
that it doesn't really matter whether or not someone respects you. What matters is if you're doing something where you can be respected, right? So it matters what you're doing. You can't
It doesn't
really
matter if they
focus,
like you, right? Like
right?
they don't have
Can't
to
focus
like
on that.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, I know for
And that's
sure. I'm certain that lots of people don't like me, and that's okay. But so long as I'm doing good work and I'm being respectful and professional, I think that's the only thing you can control. You cannot control if someone is going to give you the respect that you deserve, but you certainly can control what you're doing. And I think that's probably what I should have been thinking about when I was a younger lawyer. And that's why I say now, when I'm much older, I don't really care if they respect me, but I do care if I'm doing things properly and professionally. I do very much care about those things. So
and at the end of the day, that's why the clients are paying for it. It's what we do. It's not necessarily
exactly.
for people to like us, but I mean, it's good if people like you, but
Yeah,
it's really for what you do as a lawyer.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Leora, so I know you've been very generous with your time and you just came out of court, but maybe just and you did give us some tips for new lawyers, but in general, if I ask you like just some final thoughts on what advice can you give for new lawyers, especially for new lawyers right now? It's very difficult in these times for criminal defense lawyers to make a living. We're seeing a lot of lawyers, even senior lawyers, sadly leaving the profession.
Yes.
We're trying, with the series to help them, find ways to keep doing what they're doing and not to give up. And coming from someone like you, who's a sole practitioner, who's been doing this for a while, what advice do you have for these new lawyers who may feel discouraged right now?
Yeah, so it is it's a tough field. There's a lot of us out here, but I always say that when I look around, there just seems to be so much work that should be able to be spread around. I think one of the things that I would say to, or there's a few things I would say to young lawyers, but one of the things that I would say is really networking. I think networking is so important, and networking with more senior lawyers, more established lawyers, let them know you're there, let them know you're happy to do work, let them know that you're happy to take on certain cases. Because the truth of the matter is, we do get calls for cases. And if we're too busy or we're not doing those types of cases, it'd be good to funnel it down to younger lawyers who are hungry, who want to do the work, who are diligent. But the truth of the matter is, I don't know who those people are. And so it would be nice if there was more of this, which I'm so grateful that you do this, and it allows young lawyers to potentially see me and let them know that I'm open to having discussions with them. I'm opening to have a cup of coffee with them. That my door is open to younger lawyers to come by and meet with them. So networking, I think, is key. Secondly, I think being organized is really, really important. Oftentimes I'm in court and I see lawyers that are not organized or don't appear to be prepared. I think it's so important to spend really a lot of time on your organizational skills and your preparation skills. It's so important. And when I say networking, not just for business, but also for help. So if you have an issue, a legal issue, and you're uncertain about it, call more senior lawyers. I still do that now. Call up a colleague, call up a friend and say, hey, do you know anyone who may be able to help me through this? I don't know if people are using the criminal law listserv. I know I did, and I relied on it pretty heavily when I was younger. But I think now I call colleagues and want to actually sit down and review disclosure with them. There's lots of lawyers who will give their time. I know it's probably a daunting task to think about calling up a lawyer and saying, can you give me some of your time? But the truth of the matter is, most criminal defense lawyers are prepared to help. Most criminal defense lawyers want to help younger lawyers and will give their time. Maybe it won't be immediate, but they will give you their time. I certainly will. So I think being unafraid to go out and ask for help is really, really important, whether it be for business, whether it be for legal assistance. But call for help when and if you need it. That's probably the two biggest things I would say.
And since you mentioned the fact that people can reach out to you if they want to talk to
Absolutely.
you, network with you, or even if they want to
Absolutely.
ask you questions, where can people find you, Leora? Are you on social media
I
or?
am. Yeah, no, I am on Google, and my cell phone number's on there, my office number's on there, my email's on there, and people should feel free to drop me a line or let me know who they are and let me know the type of work they're interested in receiving. But I think there should be more of this. There should be more collegiality, and unfortunately, I felt like there was more prior to COVID, and I think COVID, unfortunately, like this field and every other facet of our lives, has socially kind of ruined us. So people should be unafraid to call and seek some assistance and some friendship, in which is often a very lonely field. So
It is.
anyway,
But thank you very much, Leora, for your time. It was very
thank
nice to
you.
meet you and to
Nice to
chat
meet
with
you.
you. And I really hope that, and I encourage if any young lawyers will be watching this, that they do get in touch with you
Me
because
too.
you are a very experienced criminal defense lawyer and one of these badass lawyers
Oh,
out
thank
there
you.
in Toronto. So it's very nice. And thank you for your time today, Leora. It was a
Thank you so
pleasure.
much. Thank you so much. So nice to meet you. I'm sure we'll speak again.
Yes.